Hello and welcome to my poetry video, actually the first one that I've ever made. I'd like to thank the Art Bar for inviting me to present my poetry at their Facebook video program. And I have about 25 minutes worth of reading for you. I hope you enjoy the poems. Some are set in the cities in which we live, mostly Hamilton in my case, but we get to travel the world a bit too. So if you're inclined, please hang around and enjoy the show and the travel. Thanks. My name is Chris Pannell, and let's get going. Let's begin with a poem called The Beach Boys Singing. And the poem begins with a couple of lines from a song by Brian Wilson called The Girls on the Beach. On the beach you'll find them there, in the sun and salty air. The daughters of muses had come down from their mothers in the mountains to embody their own vinyl permanence. What stylist knew what to do with all that blonde hair? On album sleeves in Super 8 movies, how clear are the girls on the beach, and how alive in harmony. Eternal girlishness springs from those young male voices. And one waits there for you. How Greek, how perfectly posed, desire made as real as a painting. An urn, a sunlit wall. A rebellious boy runs his hand across a statue as if to say that art will have to do. The boys by the bay, all tremor and adrenaline, take to the stage, strum themselves into a sweet haze to escape those they long for. That's why Elvis left the building. The girls seem not shy, and will never deny they've enchanted these boys. They know they can turn handsome men into swine. Or perhaps they'll be loved like Persephone 6 months in the sun, suffering Hades the rest of the year where all was cold, where no gentle breeze, romantic stars, or a growing rose ever inspired a song or a boy to sing one. One morning, one afternoon. This morning in the bookstore of the Library of Congress, I browse an anthology of 43 poets laureate of the United States of America. Foreword by Billy Collins. This afternoon at the National Gallery, I spy someone rowing a boat through the lower right corner of Rembrandt's The Mill. My wife admires the windmill catching late afternoon sun on 3 of its 4 blades. There are clouds, but no wind. She says the paint has likely faded since Rembrandt's day. The background tends to brown and the sky to white. 2 men wait close to the shoreline to tie up the boat. Its mast down and sails stowed. A figure with a child waits further up the embankment. Is that Billy Collins? I ask. I hope his boat is slowing. The flag at the tip of the mast and the mast itself looks like it might collide with the foundation of the mill, or impale one of the swains on the shore trying to help. I should relax. Once upon a time this landscape sang in shades of yellow, green, and red, as various as the anthology of laureates and Mr. Collins and the brushes of Rembrandt von Rijn, doomed to fade while outlining what was, enriching this day, pastoral Holland, energetic Billy at the oars. Now I'd like to read a couple of poems from a time in my life, once upon a time when I was a darts driver, darts standing for Disabled and Aged Regional Transit System, part of the Hamilton bus system. And 2 poems I have here. One is called Passenger Paul, 3 Trips on Darts. It's unpublished, and it's based on a true story, or perhaps 3 true stories, for the poem is in 3 parts. Part 1. The first night I was assigned to be a meds driver, Paul was on board. He saved my shift and my nascent career as a bus driver, instructed me how to get him and those 4 other cranky passengers home in the right sequence, as quickly as possible, through rush hour, gridlock, where nothing moves, and it always takes longer than an hour. An ex-cabbie, an ex-dispatcher, he knows Hamilton. Every street, every corner, every dumb idea. Part 2. On Christmas Eve, he was practically falling to the floor from low blood sugar, his wife trying to strap him up with a belt around his sunken chest. But the back of his wheelchair was too short, and everyone on the bus wondered if he would make the 40-minute trip to St. Joe's for dialysis alive. I suggested an ambulance. She said it would take too long to unload him, to make the call, to wait for them to come, and then the trip. She shoved a little chocolate between his lips. He stirred. Part 3. 2 days into January, he's binding his stump as if this is hockey and a skate lace has broken. A clean tensor bandage. He's shaved for the new year, for this sunny, bitter cold morning. His voice fills the bus, as happy as a curmudgeon can be, discussing the city, the idiots on council, the new year, the future of downtown. Like he believes in the future. He straightens up on his scooter. Something interests him in the conversion of one-way streets back to two directions. Let's roll, Paul. Find us a map and a ramp up the steps of City Hall. We'll circle the evergreens with lights and say we'll never leave, but enjoy the ride for what it is. This poem is called The Way She Loves Him. On the bus he glares as if angry to be out of the hospital. Then all feeling seems to swing with his eyes away to the starlings we can hear outside the window, as dark as questions in the trees. He's been dressed in a ball cap, grey sweats, and a red plaid coat. The chrome wheelchair, like a throne, empowers him, with equipment behind, feeding bag on a hook, tube to stomach, a square solid-state ventilator, an oxygen tank. I strap his chair to the floor, ratchets click, struts creak. I slide a seatbelt under his limp, warm arms. For every grunt, a response from her. What a great Sunday this will be. This bus will take us straight home. Your brother Henry's coming over. A barbecue like before. We pull away, and soon we pass a field stubbled with shafts of last year's corn. The next field has been neatly plowed. Perhaps he knows farming from the inside out, or has an opinion on how all these acres of earth became acres of housing for the people who live on Grassy Plain Drive or Hawkswood Trail. His mouth, dry and ajar, is hard to close. Her lips quiver, and she resumes her conversation with the man he was, hovers like a bee above a flower, yet he cannot turn to look at her. Halfway down the escarpment, crows perch on the rock-strewn sides that crumble like memories. I imagine he's searching for a place under trees, for a spot of brown that will take him, so he might escape everything in her voice. It does no good to hear. My next poem is a pre-pandemic poem, as is almost everything I'm presenting today. The title's a bit up in the air. It's a cruise review, or perhaps it should be called Alaska in 7 Days. It begins with a quotation from Robert Service. It's the beauty that thrills me with wonder, the stillness that fills me with peace. Part 1. From the port bow we face the stone feet of a mountain, a massive pair of dog paws at water's edge, ice white and snow gray with gravel, the foundation of bare peaks, sharpening the Alaskan air. Meanwhile, the chatterbox of the intercom, the director of Upsell, announces repeatedly, "We have tickets to wine tasting events. Don't miss tonight's musical stylings of Don Dinatello." He might well have added that too few pedicures and facials have been sold on Deck 7. He really wants to know if the diamond shops in town got all your money today. Have you any left for him? From steel speakers on the promenade deck, the captain's voice volleys over the sleeping and the partying cruise patrons. Marketing students in summer jobs learn the lingo. Nouns seize this chance to become a verb. Adventurize Your Summer, Part 2. The story of the Klondike, like mountains and sky, is easy to grasp. It's a disappearance the locals are trying to preserve. Like dying for gold, greed has bequeathed us a lovely scenic railway. Our enormous ship carefully drifts into a dwindling supply of wilderness experiences. No passenger escapes the overfeeding, condemned by wealth to carry his culture forever. We remain deaf to the silence, the lapping inlets where otters and humpback whales know their way. I am a page that would be free of this floating book, one of many salmon that didn't make the spawning ground and now lie dead in the riverbed or ashore mauled by a bear after the attempt. Oh, the dull edge of having it all. How excited I should be. See the gravalanche scree down the mountainside. By the milky green water of the bay, silent I will lie. The next poem is based on a comic book, based on a character in Marvel Comics, which one of the few characters who has not yet had a film made of him. I'm speaking of the Submariner, so the poem is for Bill Everett, the creator of the Submariner. Underwater. Into the streams and seaweed we sent our eyes, into the fold in the paper, and came upon a merman full of rage, and his blue-skinned race withering in the canyons of the Atlantic Ocean. The merman immediately accused us, kids with paper routes, of polluting and destroying the underwater currents that sustained them, of eradicating his tribe with our poor waste disposal practices and relentless weapons testing. Eventually, as an air breather and surface dweller, I came to know guilt and environment. And I was pleased a fictional character had noticed me. He was tragic and full of self-pity. He took oxygen from water with the gills in his neck. I understood racial difference. What do you breathe? His mother blue, father white. He had fallen from her womb into a warm geyser. The bubbles hissed across his eyes. He woke to see her smiling face. That loving flashback left me breathless in the sun-setting park. And now, too late, a box of comics bounced in the bike carrier as I flew down rutted roads home to my scolding mother and me, always late for dinner. This poem is, on the surface, about classical music, but of course, in reality, is about my father, who was had a great passion for the form and for the art. However, I, somewhat like the title of this poem, am wary of classical music. My father passed his fanaticism to me. When I was young, we were immortal. His right hand upturned over his head, he could sustain a tremulous phrase in the strings, some slow passage of a Wagner prelude, some bright phrase in Messiah. He instructed me not to clap between symphonic movements, or after the soprano's aria, or to interrupt his thoughts. Like an orchestra, I was obedient to the way a conductor's fingers can close off a note. We attended few concerts. More often in the living room, in comfy chairs, we attended the melodies and harmony. But lately, not wanting to think of him any more than I must, I don't listen to classical music much anymore. It's too late, of course, to become indifferent to the sonata, a concerto, or even a bagatelle, having once been commanded by Herbert von Karajan, by symphonies and opera. One cannot turn back. He had been a dedicated performer in the company choir. I inclined my head to the stereo system and turntable he bought at a store that is no longer there. My father fills all 56 minutes of Eroica. He has become a kind of premonition, the kind that music can provide, such as Beethoven's awareness of his approaching deafness. Young pianists and violinists can still seduce with their costumes, their languid fingering and stabbing strokes with the bow, and in days gone by we would have turned to each other from time to time to smile at the same astonishing passage, the acoustics of a church, the genius of a sound engineer. He taught me to have opinions, And later, when I found myself working in the massive main store of Sam the Record Man, I always knew how to advise the customer which was the best of 50 different versions of Vivaldi's Four Seasons in the Schwann catalogue. My father died without a requiem or the pathos of Amadeus. His finale was austere, to lie between beige and green walls, flat on his back on a mechanical bed. When he told me, "Death is nothing to be afraid of," did I nod? "You'll be leaving soon? Thank you for visiting me." Then he dozed off during Strauss's Blue Danube. I took the disc from the player, put it carefully away. I can no longer dance to the greatest waltz of all. My next poem is an artifact from a time when Hamilton was deeply divided over the construction of a highway through the Red Hill Valley. There were environmentalists, of which I counted myself one, and developers on the other side. So the poem wears its politics fairly clearly. As I say, the issues that it addresses are no longer dividing Hamilton. This is called Red Hill Sumacs. Rain hits the sumacs along the Red Hill Creek far into the valley, settles to earth into the slow stream. There's no galvanized culvert yet, but the road will be built, so the friends of City Hall may have their expressway, jobs, and money. In the sunny afternoon, mud smears make clear the path construction trailers will follow, not far from the hiker's path. The raccoon sleeps away the day in a tree. The eagle circles high, looks for mice. Random life. Soon we will have standards, lanes, rules of road, noise and light at night, everything done for the purpose of getting somewhere else, of being gone from here. The creatures are here. They have no desire to leave while the sumacs bleed in the autumn sun, and asphalt is an abstraction still to come. At the top of the food chain stands a high school student who works Sundays at the burger bar, a destination so transitory it might as well be a dream. But if she should ever pause in her order-taking, let it be because the pheasant and the wolf have wandered in and are about to fly out between the buildings on either side with whatever part of the human place setting strikes their fancy and can be shared with their young. A poem takes the shape of the paper, a roll of adding machine tape, a paper bag torn open. When our breath condenses, we write with fingers on the car's windshield. Love notes to be lost when we drive off, our names air-conditioned away. The machinery directs so much, and we, the rude mechanicals, let it go on effacing us. But the poet knows he's nothing but memory and flesh. A few disappointments about to enter unconsciousness where past generations have flown, aglow. The happy couple had a prenuptial party in June, blessed by pouring rains and hundreds of hungry souls. The tractor was driven by her younger brother. Her grinning uncle watched the towing chain draw tight. They pulled cars from the muddy field all night, wet and spinning tires, a struggle, but the timing perfect, like the inside of this bag, at hand for thinking about the future, while the wedding plays out on hilltop in a leaking tent. We shrink under the threats of weather and think of what we need to build or fix in our shelter. Some things cannot wait for better days. Brown paper, wrinkled, water-spotted flat upon my knee. My windshield fogged and clouded seems fortunate. A Caribbean honeymoon forthcoming. Bare feet warm and tingling on the sand. The next poem, well, the next two poems actually, are about travel, the peculiarities of it, and I have to say that living as we have for the last 18 months and missing the freedom of choice, at least, to decide that one would get up and go visit friends or family or simply to explore the world. It's something we miss, although it turns out to have been environmentally costly. Anyway, travel is where we see things. Travel is where a lot of my poetry comes from. And so Here is A Statue Speaks in Lisbon. Please, your coins for my hat of dreams. On columns you raised sculptures of generals, prime ministers, and queens. In gratitude you placed their faces on stamps, on paper money. Look to my second hat below my plinth. Its silver silk liner hides a few euro I could have spent on breakfast. Oh, you, the people, look up, look up! Past my shoes and trousers, shimmering green with copper tint, hesitate over my art, my gentleman's coat painted to feign oxidization, my face, too, metallic, my secret techniques. Imagine. You flocked to Florence to see David by Michelangelo do nothing. You have paid and paid to see that piece of marble imitate the ideal man. But at 90 kilos, my hunger weighs more, though marble long ago mastered the stillness. My mother says, you have raised the doing of nothing to a high art. So what might make you make a statue of me for pretending for years to be a stone in your public square? When will you install my face on the facades of a building where you shelter or work? Do not whine, my mother said. Suffering is part of the human condition. And that's my pain. To move and be thought a poor performer, a silent song, a sonnet without sentiment. Try to be still. You just try. While from this harbor explorers left, some never to return. Here I want to thump my chest for effect, while every man who pretends to be a statue eventually quits the job because he aches to move. And one more in this vein, somewhat in this vein, it's in Canada. This is Field Guide to the Kootenay Mountain Tourist. The eastern migrating tourist is a plentiful creature that travels rapidly in small herds through western North America from May to September. It has no natural enemies except others of its own kind. Typically the male drives, the female plans and instructs. A video camera replaces the television remote control commonly used for conflict escalation and resolution in their natural habitat. In herds, tourists frolic in the results of the planet's volcanic and core upheavals, collect pebbles, and are greatly amused by magnifying their vision with glass and capturing imagery. Plants and animal species frequently must endure displacement and declining numbers. For mammals, there is a deadly risk of socialization from repeated contact. Additionally, animal habitats can accumulate dangerous quantities of tourist effluent and foodstuffs dispelled from high-speed or stationary travel devices. Rain or fire are the only forces that can reliably dispel this species. Even bad weather, however, has no effect if they migrate in packs or use large flying machines. In flight, they seem almost benign, as distant as the clouds, as difficult to encounter as a snowy mountain peak. Migration in these modes is preferred as it is least obtrusive and has caused year-round residents of the Kootenay to sometimes think of tourists as a wisp of distant, concealed life. And here, the final poem of the reading. This one is set in a pandemic. In fact, it's about the pandemic. It's called A Month of Sundays. I know it's garbage day when the monster truck comes up the street. Otherwise, like Sundays, all days are the same. I want a refund on my appointmentless calendar, stifled by a pandemic, by our rules of what not to do to keep me alive, and all of you reading this. It must have worked, but for a few million here and there. Every sunrise the same, every gathering dusk. What does it gather? Can I make of tomorrow as much and as little as yesterday? Trapped in a false conflict, a meaningless life, no opposition to our thoughts, nowhere to go, as if we were sadder babes to be delivered to bed all day. Winds rise and clear the skies, make a beauteous sign of the cost of relentless busyness, of industry that also slowed. Though we are now crawling, be not a fatalist. Reach for love. Think of pursuit of what you do not know, for you may not pursue it. Evade what's viral. Evade the day to die, sooner than later. I strive into the space of time and place, and crave political action, demonstration, protest, and the greatest of grievances, and eventually resolution. What I get is awareness of all the time I've been filling this month. Empty appointment book, symbol of damnation, days off perpetual, ennui, novels unread. How have I been making so busy to no end but this? Thank you very much. My name is Chris Pannell, reading a mixture of previously published and largely new work that will hopefully soon be available. Thank you very much for listening. Take care and be well.